The Davie Shipyard is back in the news this week for a good reason. It has begun work on the multi-million-dollar Resolve project to convert a container ship into a replenishment vehicle for the Canadian Navy. But as happy as Davie is to have that conversion project, it is still irked by what happened last fall. CBC News reported earlier this month that Seaspan Shipyard in North Vancouver was awarded a $40 million contract on Election Day when the Harper government went down to defeat. Seaspan was one of the big winners, along with Irving in Halifax, of the federal government's multi-billion-dollar national shipbuilding program back in 2011. But under the terms of that competition, neither was supposed to seek a subsidy in order to fill its contract. Davie has questions they want answered. Alex Vicefield is Chief Executive Officer of Inocea, Davie's parent company, and I reached him yesterday. Good morning, Alex Vicefield.
Good morning, Susan. How are you?
I'm well, and you?
Very well, thank you.
Have you formally asked for an inquiry into that contract?
We've asked for confirmation on various items. Yes, yeah, we haven't asked for a formal inquiry. We've asked the questions about what this consisted of, in preparation for what we can do next.
What are your concerns?
Basically, of course, we have a lot of stakeholders, our employees, our union, the provincial government, and people are asking questions. People are feeling cheated. The origins of the competition were that, as you probably know, there was one shipyard which was capable and ready to build ships then, which was Davie. There were two other shipyards which needed lots of upgrades and modernization and capability improvements and so on. And the competition was based on two promises. The first one was that they would upgrade their facilities and reach this to what they called a target state to be able to build ships. And the second part of that promise was it would be done at no cost to Canada, so no cost to the taxpayer. So these latest allegations are quite serious in terms of the fact that they allege that the taxpayer has funded the shipyards. People are feeling cheated.
If it's proven that, in fact, that money was given to Seaspan for that purpose, for modernization, could that render that contract null and void? The procurement strategies contract?
I don't know, and I think also, we don't want to interfere and delay the Coast Guard and the Navy getting their ships. They need ships urgently. There's a crisis going on at the moment, specifically in terms of the icebreaker for the Coast Guard, the Navy refueling capabilities, and so on. But I think, we would like, when we keep hearing that this was a sort of a fair process. The answer to that, of course, if these allegations are true, is it wasn't a fair process. We have put in 7 proposals to the government to solve some of these capability gaps that they have. And of course, in light of this recent allegations, we'd like them to be taken, very seriously.
You told the CBC earlier this month that the procurement strategy that was initiated by that Conservative government isn't delivering ships. You've just made reference to the fact that there are gaps right now that we're seeing. You said Canada won't have icebreakers before 10 years. What is the basic flaw here in the plan as they laid it out?
It's capacity. Davie constitutes over 50% of Canadian shipbuilding capacity. And the procurement, and this current program doesn't have the capacity to build the ships. You're talking about 2 very small shipyards on either coast here, which can really only build ships one at a time. Whereas Davie, for example, can build 7 or 8 ships simultaneously. So I think the original program, when people were originally planning how they're going to do the fleet renewal, Davie was always in the back of the mind about how that could be delivered. So it's capacity, and there's so many ships that need to be renewed. There's enough work for all Canadian shipyards. So I think there needs to be a rethink on how this works.
Is that rethink the place that you obviously think there's room to maneuver here, even though the contracts have been handed to those 2 shipyards?
The contracts haven't been handed to the shipyards. This is the other sort of misconception here. What the 2 shipyards have been given is what they call an umbrella agreement, which is actually a non-binding framework agreement. It's basically a letter of intent, let's say, that says, if the terms and conditions are right, we will negotiate with you to build ships. But there's no guarantee to those shipyards to actually build the ships.
So is that why you think there's room for Davie to produce an unsolicited bid to build icebreakers, even though Seaspan is supposedly the shipyard that's charged with building icebreakers.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, the icebreaker is a crisis because originally the Louis Saint Laurent was meant to be decommissioned next year, and the polar icebreaker was meant to be delivered next year. Now, the joint support ships were prioritised to be built at Seaspan. They can only build 1 or 2 ships at a time. I'm not sure exactly what. And now the joint support ships have taken precedent. They've become delayed. So the icebreakers become even further delayed. So now we're talking maybe 10 years' time at a minimum, I think, to actually to get a replacement for the polar icebreaker. And what we have found is an almost new, very, very high ice class polar icebreaker that's available for conversion, and we've secured an option to buy it, and we'd like to put that forward. And we've had other ships as well. For example, the ship which is currently in the shipyard, which is 70% complete, which you probably remember, the 3 offshore construction vessels which we're building for export to Norway. The owner of those ships has gone bankrupt, and we've delivered the first one. The second one is there, 70% complete. And we think that will make a great ship for the Navy. And having spoken to people here at the exhibition in Ottawa, there's not one person who said that's a bad idea. I mean, everyone thinks it's a great idea.
Can you refit those ships, provide them, and then Seaspan still build?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the whole Canadian Coast Guard and naval fleet needs to be replaced. So there's enough work for everyone here, and there's a lot of ships that need to be built. So yeah, I mean, for sure, everyone can win here. And I think currently the only loser is the taxpayer.
You've cut steel on the Resolve project this week?
Yeah, we started cutting steel on the Resolve project this week. It's a great project for us, and it's a great project for Canada, I think, as a whole, because it's a new form of procurement for Canada. I mean, it's the first time that a private entity has actually taken this risk of doing the construction at its own cost, and also then leasing the ship to the government rather than selling it. And it's something. It's a P3 model, like a public-private partnership, which is something new, and it's very exciting for us, for Canada, and hopefully for the Canadian taxpayer, because it means no capital expenditure.
It feels to this observer that you're looking for ways to provide what you want to provide, what you're capable of providing to the government in terms of equipment that's needed, I don't know if I would say without regard for the umbrella plan that's in place, but at the very least, you're not accepting the fact that you weren't included in that umbrella plan that was conceived by the Conservative government. Is that fair?
Well, the umbrella agreement, I think, the whole NSPS was based on promises of future capability, which I think was the origins of this problem. When you would buy, if you would normally go and want to buy a ship, you'd go to a shipyard, or you'd find out what ship you want to design. You'd do it. You'd go out for tender. You would have each shipyard come along and give their bid for that ship, and you would base it on what's their experience, what's their track record, how many employees do they have, all these kinds of things, and then most importantly, of course, how much does it cost to build those ships in those shipyards? This current program, the NSPS, wasn't based on that. It was based on this, as I said, it was promises of future capability. It was really, anyone could come along and say, I'm promised to build the best shipyard ever. And that doesn't work. If you don't get the promises come through, then it doesn't work. I mean, and as I said the other day, Tim Hortons could have won it based on that.
To get back to the question of that $40 million contract, you said you're asking for some clarification. Could that eventually lead to legal action, given all of the as you put it, the feeling that people were cheated somewhere along the line?
No, absolutely. We will do everything we can to ensure that justice is served here.
Good to speak with you, Mr. Vicefield. We thank you for giving you a few minutes this morning.
Thank you. Susan.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Alex Vicefield is CEO of Inocea, the parent company of the Davie Canada Shipyard. We reached him in Ottawa at the annual trade show of the Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries, and the minister responsible for naval procurement, Judy Foote, actually addressed that conference yesterday. And Murray Brewster has written a bit of an analysis piece for CBC.ca, wherein he says that address was really an attempt to shut down a lot of the speculation that's been happening around delays and costs of the procurement strategy that we were just talking about with Alex Vicefield. Judy Foote said yesterday that Canadians are not going to know the price tag for the Navy's frigate replacements, which is the most complex and the largest military procurement purchase in this country's history, until the ink is dry on the contract, according to the minister. She said that the decision to keep the numbers secret is based on the fact that there are so many variables that can change and some very long planning periods involved. So she says, we have seen how these estimates cause confusion. So they won't be announcing the cost estimate for the frigate, the Canadian Surface Combatant, until the contract is signed, and Ottawa is not expected to award a design contract until next year. The agreement to build those warships won't actually be signed until 2019. One other thing that Judy Foote said yesterday, and it's being looked at as a bit of a recognition of the fact that there have been problems, especially with oversight on costs with regard to some of the procurement contracts that have been signed. The Canadian press, you might recall, back in March, suggested that from $26 billion, which was the price tag that was being quoted for some of those procurement, the building of the ships, that there have been sources that have suggested that the lifetime cost could be closer to $104 billion. So Judy Foote announcing Thursday that the number of employees working on the shipbuilding strategy will double, and it could actually triple. So obviously that's a continuing story we'll be watching.